I'm going to throw you off because we're going to skip costs, because the costs should be based on the activity. So you want to build the activity first and then go into what's it going to take to do those things. All right, so we'll start in with the planning work plan. I'm going to walk through the basic idea of how you do these work plans. First, the only required field in order to save this form is an EHP review required. EHP stands for Environmental Historical Preservation Review, and you'll need to consider that as you build your work plan, but I encourage you to select an answer and then build out your work plan and then revisit that question in order for you to actually save as you go. So this goes through steps of you build it one at a time. So you can click Add an Objective, Start and End Date. For most of you, this will be the start of the grant through the end of the grant. If we're talking EMPG, it would be October 1st of 2016 to September 30th, 2017. And HMEP needs to be by quarter for their objectives. So you saw me click through those calendar steps. I'll take this opportunity to show when you click there, you can select or click on the actual month up here and then select different years and then the month. You can also just type in the date. And it will translate it. So keep that in mind as you're working with anything with the dates. Is there a list of what all is categorized under each work activity? That's an excellent question. And for EMPG, the list of what is categorized is found in the federal grant guidance, which would be one of those reference documents out here. So for EMPG, this 0416 previous EMPG Notice of Funding Opportunity, if you open up that document, this goes through, pardon as I scroll. If you look at page 18, it describes the planning, organization, equipment, training, and exercise. But then it does branch out later on. If you look at page 31 of that document, it goes into specific detail about planning, allowable costs under planning, organization, equipment, training, and exercise. So excellent question. That's the EMPG answer. Lisa?
I'm not sure. I'll have to check and see if I uploaded it, but there is a guidelines that I will make sure that is uploaded to the document. It gives some ideas of projects, but it's a living document. It changes. But it just gives some ideas, especially on the planning side, of what would be eligible under HMEP.
So tag teaming this, again, reminder for EMPG, the objective start and end date should likely be the start of the period of performance and the end of the period of performance. unless, of course, there are a few of you that only operate for the first 3 quarters and only have activity for that first 3 quarters, in which case you would shrink that down. Now for HMEP, for the hazardous materials, those objectives need to be by quarter. All right, so then you write the objective. So the objective, you have 1,000 characters here to use. It's just what are you going to do? So for an example, one of your objectives may be to review and update 20% of the county EMA's EOP. When you come down to justification, this is where you can expand on a little bit what exactly are you going to do and why is it important that it be done. So many times in any position, I think, you get used to knowing why you do the things that you do, but it's important, especially in an application for federal funds, to describe the need. Why is this important that we update 20% of our emergency operation plan? It's not just to meet a requirement, while that is good, but it's also to make sure that we're better prepared. So you type in more information as well as why there's a need and why it is important.
For the HMEP application, for the objective, if you were to put in there a commodity flow study or update your ESF-10, down in the justification you'll need to put in there something that tells us why it's important for your community to do that and how it ties to transportation. And that's very important. Make sure that transportation piece is included and link it back to what you have going on in your community to justify the need for that project.
All right, so as you move down then, you have an objective. Then you need to list out action steps for that objective. For EMPG, we stress that with 4 quarters, it makes sense that you would have at least 2 action steps that are measurable for each quarter. So if you want, you can just go ahead and make sure you go ahead and add 8 action steps right away. Now there's differences there where some people have been successful in writing action steps that may not be specific for a quarter, but that takes a lot of effort and making sure that you put forth the effort in the quarterly reporting. You have to be really on top of what is it that you accomplished. If you're not outlining in detail what you're going to be doing here, then when it comes to the quarterly reporting time, you have to provide additional detail. So keep that in mind, and please work with me, work with your district liaisons as you iron out these action steps. But for the most part, folks found it pretty good to do 2 action steps per quarter. So for an example, sorry, I took an example that was going to start at April 1st and end June 30th, 2017. You'll notice here that the action step, you can't see all of it at the same time, which can be a little frustrating. So I do encourage you to, if you want to use a Word document, to type out your action steps and then copy and paste them. They don't have to be lengthy. Keep in mind there is a character limit. So if it's easier for you to think logically with a Word document going boom, 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 and then copying and pasting it in here, that is totally fine. So you can break it down by plan. If you don't have an action step for that quarter, let's say you know you're not going to start your planning until January, what I encourage you to do then you can just say no activity plan for this quarter if it's something along those lines, and that's acceptable because we know that certain objectives you may not start until a certain part of the year, or you may wrap up after a certain part of the year. And this is a tough balance, especially on the on a webinar here of I don't want to spend too much time just typing in information. If you're wanting examples, we can work with you and get you some good examples of action steps and milestones. For the purpose of the webinar, not to slow things down too much, could be something like this. Essentially want to get the point across that you can add action steps for as you go. These red circles with the line through it is the delete for that entire row. So when I click on that, it removes the row completely. Again, you can have multiple objectives. That's acceptable. If you want to break it out into maybe you have a planning that you're updating your plans, but then you also have another objective outside of that, and you can include that there. If you accidentally hit that, you can just click remove this objective. Again, want to point out that after you've entered this information, make sure you consider, is it going to need an environmental historical preservation review? If so, you want to make sure you turn that to yes, and then work with me to fill out that environmental historical preservation form. Want to make sure that that gets completed if needed. So after you've entered information into the planning work plan, you would click Save. And you would move your way through exercise and organization or whatever other areas you would have